cases, they are that. They're opinions as to what Sasquatch is. What's the nature of this species? You know, is it an animal? Of course, as was pointed out, we're animals. We sometimes neglect to recognize that. But the question is, are we dealing with something that's more near human or more near ape? Is it hominin? In the modern terminology, as cladistics has modified our use of those terms. Hominid now a bit. So a hominin is anything that's on the lineage leading to humans since the divergence from the last common ancestor shared by chimpanzees and humans. Whereas now the term hominid has been relegated to the family Hominidae, which includes us and the African apes. Hominini is a tribe term to narrow it down to just those direct ancestors and immediate relatives since the divergence from the chimpanzees. The term hominoid, which I insisted we use in the journal title, comes from the superfamily Hominoidea, which includes all of the great apes and humans. Actually, all of the apes, including the lesser apes and humans. Because, you know, the question of maybe of the Gigantopithecus model, we don't even know where Gigantopithecus really fits in, whether it's an exclusive near relative to the Asian ape, the only ape we have in Asia, the orangutan, or whether it's more closely related to a gorilla or chimpanzee, which doesn't mean that it had to have originated in Africa, because the ancestors of our modern African apes actually evolved in Asia Minor from a group called the Dryopithecines, which were widespread across southern Asia and Europe, but then migrated into Africa along with things like giraffes. Did you know that giraffes evolved in Europe, in Asia? Not in Africa, but in Asia. A lot of the East African fauna that we associate with visions of the Serengeti actually evolved in Asia and migrated down from land bridges during the latter part of the Miocene and Pliocene. So near human, near ape. Well, what are the criteria? What are the criteria that we use to measure those qualities? And I don't think it's an either or. We're talking about a continuum. We're talking about characteristics that have a continuous variation of expression or degree of expression. There was an individual who called into a radio talk show, and she said, well, when this thing walked away from me, it turned and looked at me, and it grinned. And only humans can grin, right? So it must be a human. Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you think about the Pukwas masks and the depiction, the wild man of the woods, the characteristic expression is the mouth, this muscular mouth pulled back to expose these even teeth in this young chimp. And it has many different meanings. When we talk about language and the interpretation of the meaning of those words, facial expressions likewise have subtleties. This one is probably, I mean, he may be in trouble. That maybe, and we do that sometimes too. You know, when we grin at someone, we smile at someone, a stranger walking down the street. It's nice to think that it's a friendly gesture, but in reality, it's a submissive gesture. We're saying, hey, I won't hurt you if you won't hurt me. Breasts. They point to the obvious pendulous breasts on Patty, and they say, well, only human females have pendulous breasts, therefore, since Sasquatch is sometimes described as having breasts, they must be human. Well, a lactating gorilla has a bust line that, you know, many women might be quite envious of. And that could well be that Patty exhibits this, is quite buxom because she may have just given birth. I actually had, and I'm not saying, don't quote me on this, I'm just saying that a student of mine came in one day, and I have an 11 by 14 print of the 352 frame that I bought from Roger Patterson and the Northwest Research Association when I was 11 years old after seeing the movie and meeting him at the Spokane Coliseum. And I had that frame, and it's hanging on my wall in the office. And one of my dental students came in. His wife had just given birth because he had just missed his exam and had to make it up. He comes up and he looks up there and he says, oh, look, she just had a baby. He said, what? He said, well, she has that Dunlap syndrome where the belly Dunlap overdeveloped. And it sure does, and it comes right back, and then it blends into the midriff right here. doesn't go all the way around like a shirt hanging out of a costume, as has been suggested by some critics. But if, those of you who have experienced that or witnessed that, all that stretched skin for a while, it kind of hangs there loosely. And that would explain her very obvious breasts, because you also know that immediately after childbirth, the milk comes in, and that postpartum engorgement makes those breasts quite prominent. So that's one possible suggestion. I'm not saying that Eric Beckjord was right, that there was a little baby crawling around on her stomach, but as in this picture. Well, they walk upright. They're walked bipedally, so they must be human.